Welcome to The Citizen Takes the Mic. And today we have as our guest Manshi Asher, and we'll be discussing some very important topic which is otherwise hidden by the routine politics that is going all around. We'll mainly be talking about issues pertaining to environment and the concerned sub issues also along with it. And Manshi, as you know, is an expert who's been working on the issues of environmental disasters, the state of rivers, solid waste management, and other related fields as well. Welcome, Manshi.
Thank you. Thanks, Rajiv.
Well, Manshi, we'll start off with a very important, event that has just passed. That was the 50th anniversary of the Chipko movement. And Chipko, for our generation, the likes of us, we know very well what it was and where it has gone. But for our viewers, particularly the younger lot, can you please give a kind of recap on Chipko movement, what it was, and what's its relevance today?
Yeah. I think it's very interesting that we start from here because Chipko is relevant at so many different levels, and there have been so many different perspectives around what the movement meant then, how it evolved, and then what it means today. And like you said rightly, that we've celebrated the 50th year in end of March of Chipko, when in this Alaknanda Valley in Garhwal of Uttarakhand, what is today Uttarakhand, there was a movement where in the upper regions of these villages called Lata and Reni, there was a conflict between forest mafia from the plains. Then UP, Uttarakhand was not there. So plains of UP and Uttarakhand was part of, the hills were part of that. And there's always been a long-standing demand for a separate hill state, which is also connected with this movement, or this movement becomes an important milestone in that demand. And where the conflict was essentially about the mafia chopping the trees for timber, for production of furniture and bats and paper and other things. And the women saying that the women, leading the movement, and leading because women play a very important role as far as the relationship with the forest goes, because the day-to-day task of the labor of bringing fuel wood, fodder, and other essential services, grazing animals, lies with the women. So there's a tendency to essentialize the Chipko movement as that, women have a closer relationship with nature. That relationship is actually, grounded in the everyday labor that the women are to put in. And this is there across the country, but in the hill areas, it's something that is very visible. So the women, hugging the trees, and that becoming a symbolic sign of saving the environment. That is how it was interpreted. But what it was essentially was an assertion over the resource. Whose forest is it? Was the question. And the people of the village saying that this is our forest and we have the first user rights to it. And if this forest is cut down for commercial purposes, then our daily livelihood needs will be jeopardized. That was the message of the movement. And of course, over the years, it was interpreted as, it led to a green felling ban in the hills, which was meant for the forest department, actually, which is a colonial forest department, grounded in colonial forest policy, where forests were looked at from the British times as a revenue earning source that had to be commercially managed, and the forest department took complete control over it. The green felling ban was that came after Chipko was supposed to apply to the commercial felling of trees. But what actually has happened over the years is that conservation policies have alienated people who actually depend on these resources for their livelihoods from the forest. There are various layers to this entire question of environment, because in India, the whole and especially in the rural areas, in the Adivasi areas, in mountain regions, the question of environment is essentially the question of our forests, rivers, and land, and who has custodianship over these,
Yeah,
who gets to use this, who gets to decide how these are going to be used, how these are distributed, whether it is within the community or between the community and the state. And this tussle has been there constantly. And the movements that have asserted, we call them environmental justice movements precisely because it's not just about saving nature, which is outside actually of the society, but saving saving ourselves or saving the community, which is also dependent on nature. So seeing ourselves as a part, seeing society as a part of nature, and this linkage between nature and society has slowly broken down. So at a global level, when we are facing such a severe climate crisis, a severe ecological crisis, the question of Chipko is extremely relevant. But at the local level also, today, the villages of Lata and Reni, which inspired, a movement in the entire belt to regenerate
the forests.
resources, community forest management, and various other initiatives, and right down to different parts of the country, various movements have been inspired by the Chipko movement. Today, those villages have to be, emptied out or face the threat of displacement because of the widespread mega infrastructure construction in that area, because of various climatic events, extreme events that have, and what we saw in Tapovan, and now what we are seeing in Joshimath, that entire valley is
Dholi
in
Ganga
a
also.
crisis.
Yeah.
So, I think that it's important to look at it, look at the relevance of this entire issue at various levels, and also about the role that women play, one in society as the social production role that women play, the resource the resource protection role that women play. And we see even in now Ladakh, the movement that is going on for democratization. This is also now again connected with the Himalayan belt. So there are various layers and various perspectives with which we need to look at Chipko today.
Well, I remember as a child, Mr. Sundarlal Bahuguna coming to my school and delivering a lecture somewhere in late 70s on Chipko movement. One, we don't find such interactions, with children on such topics. They're rare to find nowadays. One is that thing. And second, of course, like you pointed out, that whole model of development, the question is whose development and at whose cost, because it's always, whatever projects come, it's always said that it's for the development of the society, and development again is something very subjective. So there's one thing, that is happening after Chipko, when we are seeing that in this entire Himalayan belt, there is this debate that is raging. On one side, those who bring the projects say that it's for modernization, whereas the people, people who are fighting to protect their local resources, they say no, we need a kind of a model which is decentralized, totally local resource based. So that is a kind of tussle going on, and right now we are moving towards an election. That is one thing. And during elections, we've always seen people raise such issues, but somehow they never become the core electoral issues, whether it is Uttarakhand, Himachal, let's say Ladakh, or Northeast. Why is that so? Why don't these issues become the core electoral issues?
Yeah, thank you for this question. And let me, just respond to your comment about the curriculum and the,
Yeah.
the environment education in
Interactions.
schools. Yeah, like I engage with my son's, curriculum, and I see that environmental studies now is an essential part right from primary school. It's there, constantly being addressed in the textbooks. It's very interesting that it's intensified this, understanding of saving the environment that is spoken of in all the textbooks, and the children are being taught the importance of water resources, what's happening with pollution, all this in the education curriculum. But at the same time, those children are completely cut off in their real lives from their natural environment, or what we say that, in the coming times, in the future, what kind of what kind of environmental situation crisis they're going to inherit. That is a complete contradiction of what, this the education curriculum is teaching. So in reality, I mean, we are not being able to address it. There's a lot of conversation around environment, but the problem is, now I'm coming to your second question, that conversation about environment does not translate into a conversation about our economy. It does not translate into a conversation about our politics, about our decision making processes, about our governance, about what is it that is that how resource distribution should be organized in a society, how production should be organized, how this is directly linked with the kind of footprint we are having on the earth. And these two things are delinked, and the environmental question has become a question of science and technology. It's become a question of trying to look for technological solutions
Solutions, yeah.
to and this solutionism is again part of the same model of economic growth, which is top down, which is extractivist, which does not question the way resources are, who's making the profits, and who is going to pay the cost. So for instance, if we are talking about solar, for instance, as the solution, or net zero as the solution that is being pushed and that is being glorified and hyped, and it comes from a global climate mitigation strategy. Actually, large scale centralized solar power production is replicating the same problems that you see in other fossil fuel
Fossil
based
fuels, yeah.
sources. So if we do not address the question of how our economy is structured, we are not going to be able to figure this out. And the second is the question of how our democracy functions. Where are the decisions taken? So federalism plays a very important role. Decentralization plays a very important role, which comes to the other thing that you referred to about the Himalayan region, for instance. We need a place-based plural approach to, if we have to address the questions of sustainability, and we don't have a choice, because the impacts becoming more and more. So on the one hand, you have the slow onset disasters. You have we had a winter which was fully absent of snow. I mean, we had very poor precipitation, and then we'll suddenly, and now we are going to head towards drought, probably a season of forest fires, followed by severe
rainfall.
massive sudden rainfalls, and that will lead to landslides and floods. So this has become a cycle of disasters that is repeating itself, and it's directly connected with, number one, global climate change, of course, but that itself is connected with the the whole, I mean, now even in the IPCC report, they have had to recognize that colonial one is that, of course, industrial development, industrial expansion, or industrial revolution was the time that we see the temperatures changing.
Rising.
But that colonialism is something that needs to be recognized, because there's one part of the world that has grabbed the wealth and has given a development model and has implemented a development model that has been extractive, and there is another part of the world that has borne the cost. So there's an injustice at various levels. Why it doesn't become an electoral issue, or I mean, this is a no-brainer in a way, but if you look at just at the electoral bonds, for instance, there is a very close connection between the corporate lobby and
Interests.
the nexus between corporations and the government, and the political parties being funded, funded by corporations, and then serving the interests in the name of ease of doing business. And that interest includes the dilution of environmental norms. It includes the dilution of public consultation processes. It includes the shrinking of democratic spaces in environmental decision-making processes. And it also includes the targeting of people who are raising questions, environmental, defenders, human rights defenders, who have raised these issues have been constantly targeted around the world. This is not something that just India is seeing. This is something that we are seeing across the whole globe. So this is where this is where elections and electoral politics then become suspect, that how is it that we are going to democratize, bring really true participatory democracy on the ground, is a challenge before the citizens, because without accountability, transparency, and participatory governance, we are not going to, be able to even take up challenges like the environmental crisis and address them.
Another thing, Manshi, before we talked about this, you were talking about the role of women in environmental movements. See, I've also noticed one thing, that most of these movements, whether it was the latest being the Joshimat, or let's say the other movements that have been going on, women have been at the forefront. You talked about the creation of Uttarakhand. Yes, women were leading the movement. Yet, they've led all the movements and they've been at the receiving end also. How do you explain this?
See, just like we have a capitalist, structure or capitalist economy, our society is also, patriarchal in nature. And this patriarchy, is about control over women's bodies, women's decision-making power, women's presence in public spaces, women's presence in politics, and women's, ownership over resources. So women are not there in the decision-making space, and it's not just women. I mean, this hierarchy is there in various arenas, whether it's religion, ethnicity. You see that gender. You see these hierarchies. But specifically, speaking about the question of women, I would say that, because, like I said earlier, women have the role of, of collecting the resources, of nurturing the family. If you have a river that dries up, if you have a spring that dries up, if you, have a forest that is cut down, it increases the burden or the labor of women. You have to move further away, especially in rural areas. Women are traveling further and further distances,
Kilometers.
just to these, longer hours are being spent just to collect these resources. Apart from that, whether it is in agriculture or it is in any, you see the dispossession, when dispossession takes place or displacement takes place, or when incomes go down. If there are farmer suicides, you've heard about the state of the widows in Punjab or in Vidarbha. So women are at the receiving end when there is an economic crisis also, because that becomes a crisis at the household level for the poorest people. And because the spaces for decision making for women, that access is lacking, women are not able to kind of give their input. So if you, for instance, I'll just give a small example, that when a project is, being pushed into an area, you'll see that the contractors will talk to the men.
Men.
And the land is owned by men. When men agree to sell land also, the compensation money comes to the men. So, that whole decision-making process, even within the household, at the Gram Sabha level, is also within control. And that is also where the compromise takes place, where people are, even if people are opposing, it's, there are various ways in which the contractor lobby will then try to bribe and, get their way out, or get people, or through alcohol and other means, through petty contracts, through petty, promises, try to buy the consent or manufacture the consent. So in this process also, women are marginalized and alienated. And yet, yes, in, many people's movement, you see it is the women who are coming out in the forefront, because it's a
Being the
question of
stakeholders
also
also.
future
The biggest.
generations.
Yeah.
Because if you look at, we just had a press conference day before yesterday, where 6 women from Ladakh who were sitting on fast for 10 days after Sonam Wangchuk, they spoke, and all of them referred to, we are worried about what is going to happen to our children. We have sacrificed our children for the security of this country. We have given them to the armed forces so that they can keep the nation secure. But now when we need the country, where is the country for us?
Where's
So
the country?
yeah, so women are raising these questions, and we need to pay attention to this question of, security of future generations.
Well, coming to the issue of projects that you were talking about, you see, there's this debate that has been going on for decades now, whether we need a mega project or whether we need, smaller projects. And I've worked in places like Gujarat also. When you're talking about women bringing water, I've been, reporting on water stories, women at one point, carrying water for kilometers on end just to bring that home. And then I've also reported on, the crucial Narmada project also. See, on one side, there was this environmental disaster taking place in MP. On the other side, there was a requirement of water in Gujarat. This project was always, a controversial one. And after that, we've had so many projects and so many controversies on this thing. What do you feel? A person is trapped between this debate of mega projects and smaller projects. Where lies the solution? What needs to be done?
I think that what has happened is this development versus, environment debate, this binary, a false binary has been created. Because there is there can be a rethinking of what kind of, like I said again, that it's ultimately about the, how the economy will function, and who will own the resources. And if the state has made certain promises through the constitution, whether it is the right to life or the right to equality, then it is the responsibility of the state to, ensure that whether it is food security or whether it is social security, that is given to all the citizens, irrespective of region, caste, creed, religion, etc. That is one. The other is that this whole thing that I was talking about of federalism and a very place-based approach, a context-based approach. Because if you talk about coastal communities, there's a question of, how do we sustain fisheries? We will have to talk about the small fishers, because it is they who are larger in number. We have to break down every time we use the word development, what does it mean? Who's interested? Because it's a charade. It's actually, it hides what the real agenda is. And the real
Scenario
agenda is
is,
profit making. So,
yeah.
If we have big trawlers owned by big companies who want to do deep sea fishing, it's going to directly impact the smaller fisher people, and their rights, and they are larger in number. And the unemployment that is being created for the last 3 decades, we have seen a jobless growth where the primary sector is shrinking, and the manufacturing sector is also not growing like that.
It's a tertiary sector.
Yes, it's the tertiary sector, which is just kind of jobs which are in either in the construction industry. Even if you look at the electoral bonds, you see it's the energy, infrastructure, road building
Yeah.
companies who are now running the economy. So and mining, of course. So it's purely extractive kind of industry which is running, not providing livelihood. Promised employment, and now we don't even have adequate data on the same, because there's so many smoke screens around the data. How much of it is being collected, the questions around all kinds of data, whether it is data on the hunger index or it is data on unemployment, there's a smoke screen around it. But in reality, we know that more and more people are being pushed to the margins, and you have a concentration of wealth which is happening in the top 1 to 5% of the population, and that should be a cause. This inequity should be a cause of alarm. So every time we speak of development, we should not turn our faces away from this inequity that is being created as a result of this development, and the dispossession that this development is creating, and the ecological crisis that this development is based on.
Another thing, Manshi, you've worked quite a lot on the health of Himalayan rivers. Let's talk about. Can you just tell the audience where things are heading? What is the health of our rivers? What is the state of health of our rivers? What is happening? What is the future going to be like if we continue on the path that we are already following?
So on rivers, I would say that it's not just the Himalayan rivers. If you look at the whole country, you have rivers in crisis. Almost 50% of our rivers are polluted. 60% of the rivers are on the verge of drying up. And again, when we talk about, and when we talk about our when we talk about rivers, we tend to just look at them as water bodies.
Yeah.
And even in our earlier, if you look at all these, many of these project proposals or DPRs for these, dam projects,
Dams.
or they talk about rivers, water getting wasted in rivers. Water is getting wasted by going to the sea. Now, if you look at the Himalayan rivers, the entire Indo-Gangetic plains, the Punjab plains, the whole Brahmaputra delta, that it is a fertile food producing belt because of the rich sediment that the rivers have, that are flowing from the mountains to the sea. They're carrying this sediment and have formed this delta over centuries. Now they are feeding, this delta is feeding the whole country perpetually and virtually, and we are questioning the role of the rivers. We are only looking at the water. We are not even looking at the sediment. We are not looking at the riverine ecology. We are not looking at the riparian communities.
Erosion.
Yeah, we are not looking at the riparian communities who live along these rivers, and the civilizations that have evolved, the cultures that have evolved around these rivers over, time immemorial. And with interventions like dams, like interlinking of rivers, like when you say that we'll take surplus water from one river and put it in a dry river to make up for this, and for that the kind of engineering structures that you will build will further tamper with with the natural flows of the river. So the basic crisis that our rivers face today is that, number one, they are facing commodification. They are facing, appropriation. Their flow is being stopped. The natural environmental flow is being stopped, which is causing a crisis. And, there are now the whole question of in the Himalayan rivers is of floods, because already we have a very dam dense belt in Himachal. The Indus river basin. You see Kashmir is, you see a lot of hydropower projects being built there. And in Arunachal and in,
Uttarakhand, Sikkim.
Sikkim, yeah, in the eastern region also on the Brahmaputra Teesta river basin, you see all these dams. And if all of them are built, Himalayas will be the most dam dense region in the world. And what we saw in Sikkim,
Last
last
year.
year, or even in Himachal,
Himachal.
yeah, where the government, I mean, the floods impact went right down to Punjab. And it's very simple to call it a climate disaster. But what actually it was that, okay, there was a heavy rainfall, but the whole cascade of dams which stopped the flow of the river did not leave the water on time. And then when suddenly it was not able to handle the water flow,
The
they
flow.
left the river, and that led to floods right up to
Punjab.
Punjab. And this late opening of the gates in the dams, the malfunction of gates in the dams, these are really serious issues. Why is it that these dams were not able to control floods? Why do they become a reason for floods? Not just the dams, but all kind of encroachment of the riverbed. And I'm not referring to the encroachment that is referred to by the government, which is that people are building their homes along, because that
Buildings.
is something that the government is very well, the administration is very well aware of, and tries to kind of hide its own failings, its own governance failings. Also, many of those families who are forced to build along the riverbed are the poorest in many places.
The
We
most
saw that in
vulnerable.
Mandi. Yeah, it was a community that one particular set of families got their homes got wiped out, their jugis got wiped out, but they were sitting there because the government said that we will allot you housing, we will allot you housing. They've been building, and in the city, I mean, in the sense, they've been serving as construction workers in the city for
House
so many
helps.
years now, but they still don't have proper housing, and they end up occupying the most unsafe places. And the fact that there are dams upstream, and that will suddenly, that have, like, for instance, is a very good example of the Pando Dam, which leaves its water the on the Beas River. Now there's a Satluj link. This is a Beas Satluj link project. So what it does is it takes the water of the Beas and it puts it in the Satluj.
Satluj.
So for the last 30 years, the flow of the Mandi has seen very trickly flow of the Beas. It has not seen that kind of flow at all. Suddenly this year, when the Beas floods, the Pando Dam leaves the water on the Beas riverbed, and people are shocked to see by then so much construction has come up along the Beas in downstream. So what I'm trying to say is that we need, river, like, just when we talk about forest governance, when we talk about land, and when we talk about rivers or water sources, we need governance again, which is very robust, which is where, the planning keeps, in the forefront the concept of sustainability and equity, both. And justice, because there are people who don't have access, and then there are people who are, really literally appropriating. So we need to have these concepts inbuilt in our policies and in our governance, and communities need to be, riparian communities need to be involved. Just like we say that community forest management, and we say community forest governance, community forest rights. Similarly, we'll have to work for rivers. Similarly, we'll have to work for land. So this needs to be looked at more holistically across the board.
Last question, Manshi, is, you've been talking about hydroelectric projects, you've been talking about dams or other projects. You see, we have laws that exist on paper. We have a procedure where you're supposed to, involve the Gram Sabhas, where you're supposed to have an environment impact assessment. What happens to these laws? What's the real scenario on the ground?
Yeah, I mean, the institutional setup that is supposed to implement the laws, I would say that that is, for instance, just an example of the Pollution Control Board. If you're talking about pollution of rivers, or we are talking about air pollution, the Pollution Control Board is supposed to, have a process in place, but it's understaffed. Pollution control boards are dysfunctional in most states, and where they are functional, they are in cahoots with the companies or the violators. So there you go. I mean, you have the and then the whole question of that we cannot stop development keeps coming. So if you have, so punitive action is not taken. So people who are affected by pollution will be constantly complaining or raising issues, taking it to court even. But then judiciary takes long to, give justice. In many cases, we have seen that fines have been imposed on the petitioners. It's very difficult to have access to lawyers and the legal system to even fight for those basic rights. So there are various issues around implementation of the law. But the other thing is that what I said earlier also, that in the last 2 decades, 1.5, 2 decades, we've seen a complete dilution of environmental laws as well. And this is happening in the name of ease of doing business, because if you are going to go through a consultative process, if you're going to do a robust environment impact assessment, which is also multidisciplinary, which takes into account the geology, hydrology, riverine systems, everything for a project, what are the kind of impacts that will happen on the communities, how having consultation with communities, this entire process is going to take time. And it requires a certain degree of fairness in it, or lack of biasness. Now, if you look at in India, the EIA, the Environment Impact Assessment studies are done by private consultants who are paid by the company who is building the project. So if the project proponent is going to pay the consultants, then obviously none of the reports, EIA reports, are going to say that this project is going to have far higher environmental cost than it is going to have any benefits. So if this kind of a report we've never seen, then the whole decision making process where people were to be involved, that has also like Gram Sabha consent, consent of the forest rights under the Forest Rights Act, etc. Slowly, these processes are compromised at various levels. Legally, illegally, they are compromised, and these, sometimes despite good court orders, these have not got implemented on ground. So I think the problems lie at multiple levels, but it all boils down to the whole, the politics, economics nexus. Because as long as this, this entire politics is going to be rooted in the profit motive, and is going to be governed by this profit motive and governed by the contractor lobby, this is going to continue.
Well, I often joke around that, today sustainable development is being defined as we develop and you sustain. That's the kind of thing it has come down to be. Thank you, Manshi, for a lovely discussion and enriching us with various aspects of environmental concerns. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thanks, Rajiv.